They may be different than you from what they believe their social values are, but they're a child of God. We created a lot of mentoring groups. We call them discipleship groups. They're still going on. And we're a faculty member.
Hey, welcome to another edition of Living Boldly with Purpose. And I am Dr. B as your host. And there's sometimes when you get to do things that make a difference in a way that's not only that you hope, you hope every single one of these impacts other folks and that they can watch this and that they can become different people and move their lives forward. But then sometimes these episodes just impact you. As a person, I tell folks, I was telling a person yesterday that I was on her podcast, and I was just saying I get to be the luckiest person to interview all these folks because I get to gain more, I get to learn more, I get to become a better person as a result of doing it. And so a few weeks ago, Coach Franson and I, we started down a path on coaching tips for life. And we were into it so much, and the material was so good, we didn't get to finish all of them. And so I asked him to come back. So I have Dr. Terry Franson on with me again. Probably, in my opinion, the best coach in the world because he was my coach, and I got to spend a lot of time with him. But I've coached around a lot of coaches over the last 38 years, and I still haven't found one better than coach in the overall aspect of it, because you'll find some coaches who are very technical and they may be able to get you, whether it's a business coach or an athletic coach, where they can tell you the technical skills that you need. But then what I think is more important is why athletes excel and why athletes can be elite, or why when you're a business person can be at the top of his game is not just the technical stuff. It's the stuff that goes on between our ears, the stuff that stops us from being able to achieve greatness because we can't get out of our own way. And why coaches are so important is they help us get out of our own way by relating to us in a way that we can take it, move the needle forward, and be better at what we're doing. And so that's exactly what we're doing. We're in part 2 now. He's come up with 20 coaching tips for life. I think he whittled it down to the 70. I would love to see from 70 to 20. I would love to see what those other 50 were. And maybe someday we'll get to. But for the first episode, if you want to go back and check it out, or maybe you're one of these people who just watched the first one and now you get to jump to the second one without the 2-week break, right? So we got Lead from the Heart as our first one. The purest form of excellence is brokenness. We talked about that. We talked about give your job your best, not your all. When what did I say? When the wheels. So when the wheels hit the ground. So when you get home, you can't. Your coach can't be your. Coaching can't be your everything. Your family is the most important. That's what that one talked about. FaceTime over screen time. Lead as a human being, not as a human doing. I said the first no is the beginning of the opportunity, which is great. He talked about the big time. You're going to have to go back and listen to these. We may touch on them again a little bit, but that's cool. The real measure of success is not what you do compared to others, but compared to your own best self. That was a good one. And then we said team together, each achieves more. And what does it mean to be on a team? And so I think we're going to start back with lead as, which one did we? Oh, I guess we didn't talk about lead as a human being, not as a human doing. My focus is too often on checking it off my list. So let's start with that one because we did talk about that one. My bad. Let me go back. Let's see. Here's the one. Oh, Coach, I don't know which one we talked about because I have some.
It's okay.
And then, so I think we talked about the real message. It's not what you do compared to others.
Yeah.
The big time, the first 5. All right. So look for sacred encounters. Look for sacred encounters. Let's start there at 10.
Just a little bit of backdrop similar to what I shared last time, just for review.
Okay. Yeah.
So as I got close to retirement after, 45 years in coaching and teaching and being a dean of students at Azusa Pacific University, um, kind of wanted to put down my thoughts over my life of tips that were really important for me that I learned, sometimes, oftentimes the hard way. And so I would write down the last 3 or 4 years. And then finally I said, I can't do this 70. I'll have to get it down to 20. And so that's kind of the foundation for this podcast with Dr. B, who, by the way, I've known for over 40 years. He came to Azusa Pacific in the early 80s, which is a school that he went to and that I taught and coached at. And so we've stayed in touch ever since. And I'm so proud of him and what he's doing, and got to know his children, his wife, and the whole thing. So it was just a great relationship. And today's a representation of that. But in these tips, we kind of walk through some of those. And we're halfway through, I would say, and kind of like looking for sacred encounters is one of the ones that I had written down. That's my number 10. And that's where, where you're just looking and your eyes are wide open and you're noticing others. You may be noticing that woman with a walker who's trying to get her groceries out to her car. You may be noticing a homeless person. You may be noticing somebody who seems sad or in need. And those are oftentimes opportunities, sometimes as much as 5, 10, 15 minutes. And Brian talked a lot about walking around the track. And that was one of the things I would do with a lot of my athletes to kind of get to know their heart, but also noticing other people in your daily routine where you might be a difference maker, where you might bring joy, or you might be able to bring hope, or you might be able to give somebody a little bit of money. But looking for these sacred encounters where sometimes just a brief moment can be so special to another human being that it might really put them on a different course, or just realize that they're important, that they're important and somebody noticed. So those are important to me. And I, to this day, even though I'm not like coaching, I try and keep my eyes wide open so I don't get so focused on got to get this done, got to get that done, that there isn't room for somebody to walk across my path where I sense and feel God's presence and saying, hey, go over to that person, say hi, or help that lady pick up her bags of groceries, or maybe, somebody at a meeting that I'm at and I see a real sad face, or listen to somebody having a hard conversation, and then just trying to be a bridge, and for God to use us that way. Um, and then this next one is just be in relationship with those who might think way different than you. And I think of the political aisle right now and the tremendous division in our country. And who is it that will walk across the aisle? And I'm saying that not just in Congress, but in our lives, where somebody's different. They may be different than you from a faith perspective. They may be different than you from a political perspective. They may be different than you from what they believe their social values are, but they're a child of God. And I think for us to be able to connect with people who are different than us, not just stay in our own conclave, our own little group, we learn so much. We learn so much. And even though we might not agree, I'm sure there's something to be learned. I see that all the time, and I'm one of these people who, I guess, I can be annoying sometimes because I might sit down in the middle of a conversation that's kind of foreclosed and just kind of listen and then maybe speak into it if I have an opportunity. But I think it's important that we don't isolate ourselves. And I think it was Francis of Assisi said, preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words. So just to be with others and speak when you're told to, when you are prompted to speak, and otherwise connect. And again, going back to my first one is connect at the heart, connect at the heart. And it's amazing how many people are waiting for those kinds of things to happen, and yet maybe they don't feel comfortable in walking across to your space. So consider walking across to their space, which leads to the other one, number 12 here, which is everybody matters. Don't prejudge others, hear their story, learn from them. So, in other words, oh, they're one of those, they believe this way, or they belong to that. And so we kind of cast them out of our sphere of connection. And that doesn't go far. And that's what we're seeing again so much in our country and in our world, that, oh, you belong to that group, or you belong to that group, or you go to that church, or you don't go to church, or you believe this way or that way. And we limit so much of the opportunity that we have to, again, walk into somebody else's space and get to know them and bestow love upon them as God leads us.
Yeah, let me just ask you, stop you real quick, just to jump in, because I think when I'm thinking about connectedness, and we live in this world where people are longing to be connected. And as a coach, I think we forget that either our athletes or whoever we're coaching is looking at us. They're looking at our character, because people realize that I think this saying that John Maxwell says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And one of the things that I can remember as you're talking about matters of the heart is I could see you having these encounters with others where you really cared. And that meant so much to me. Because sometimes as athletes or as people, we get into our own heads, we get into our own worlds. We think about, hey, me. And then we get to see the person who is helping us learn who we need to be, giving to others and connecting with others. I think you even told me offline about something that you keep in your pocket when you see somebody who's in need that allows you to connect with others. Maybe you can share a little bit about that, because it's that part of the heart that allows you to be able to see beyond the little scope of whatever you're working on with that particular person.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I don't know if I talked about it last time. I don't think I
Yeah,
did.
yeah.
We had a couple guys who were suffering with cancer, and we had a time to get together and to encourage them. Their families came, and I don't know, 70 or 80 athletes from Brian's era came, and we all got together at the end and we prayed for these guys. Both of them are in really serious situations. And I sat next to a lady who was in a wheelchair, and I just said, hey, can I pray with you? And she said, would you please? And so I prayed with her, and she grabbed my hand and she put this in my hand. You can see, if you can see him right here. Hold him up.
See a little
It's
Jesus.
it's a small Jesus. And she placed it in my hand, and I was going, what is this? And I looked at it, and she goes, yeah, I keep these in my pocket. And when I go places and have a conversation like this, I'll hand one over to a person. And so I bought for $19 on Amazon. I got 60 of them, and I'm on my second bag. But interesting, yesterday I was in a restaurant here, and there's a lady by the name of, her name is Sheila. And so most everybody has been so thankful, and they almost get emotional because they know Jesus is the ultimate source of love. They may have a different faith tradition, whatever, but nobody's really been offended. Then yesterday I went to give one to a lady who I really like, and she said, that's okay. I don't need that. I've got it figured out. And I said, I'm sorry. And I said, I hope that wasn't weird. And she goes, no, it wasn't weird at all. I think
Oh
my
my
wife would think it's a little bit weird, but I got like 3 or 4 in my pocket today. There's some guys working on the house out front. I might go give one to each of them. But it's amazing how little things like that open up conversations to the heart, because this dude was all about the heart. It's all about the heart. I'm moving around here trying to get them on the screen. So
God.
$19, you can get 60 of them. Pass them out.
I love it. And this, you think of that sacred encounter that you can have, and that might be
Yeah.
what opens up the conversation so that you can have that, because it's not always about the what you're doing right this second. It's about looking and being able to notice others that may be in need. And like I said,
Yep.
we're with the internet and this. It's such a beautiful tool. You and I can have this conversation from across the country, but at the same time, we get so stuck in being in here that I was reading a place where they said there's an actual chemical when we're in proximation with people that we put out that allows us to create relationship. And so the reason we get so tired on the internet and the reason we get so tired on screens is because we are releasing that chemical to each other, even though we're talking to each other, but it can't reach you, right? Because that chemical can't jump through the screen through the internet. And so we get so tired because it's bouncing off the screen. And so much of us are, and we're looking for real connection, right? Real relationships where, there's so many people who, when you're scrolling, they put up stuff on the internet that is their best life. That's not their normal life. It's not what they go through every day. What they go through every day is what you see when you're giving out a little statue, where you're giving out, hey, I see that there might be an opportunity to just show you some love. And you're asking people,
and you're so right on that, Brian. And it's so interesting because when I do this, you can immediately sense a connection at the heart. And going back to screen time over real, screen FaceTime, real FaceTime over screen time and how critical that is. And, being in an older generation, I'm 73, we didn't have all the screens. And one of the things when I was dean of students at Azusa Pacific, and we had, I don't know, maybe 5,000 undergraduates, one of the things that I was picking up on is they were really good with technology, but in terms of communication and one-on-one, that was becoming a little more of a lost art. And that was, for some, more awkward. And so the more that we created a lot of mentoring groups, we called them discipleship groups. They're still going on. And where a faculty member or staff member would lead that group with about 5 or 6 students and just be able to talk face to face and create a space where it was okay not to be okay, and how important those connections are. They're critical for us. They're absolutely critical. And that leads to one that I wanted to share here is to mentor, but also to be mentored. So even an old guy like me at 73, maybe I'm, helping Brian, helping this person, helping that person. Well, who's pouring into me? Getting back to the connection part of it. And I have probably, I've had 2 or 3 really special older males in my life. 2 have passed, but I do have a therapist, and he's been very helpful. I've had him for a lot of years. And he's been very helpful as well because he knows the good, the bad, and the ugly of Terry Franson. And there is the good, the bad, and the ugly. Did I lose you, Brian?
No, I'm still here. I just put you up. Let me.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm not Mr.
You're good.
But it's so important. Like Brian knows in our relationship that he could pick up a phone, and it would be okay not to be okay with me. And so being mentored is really important no matter what age you are, or having that more senior person. And I shared this in the last podcast. I always look for broken leaders because I shared sacrifices God wants are a broken spirit and a contrite heart. Somebody who is vulnerable, who maybe was known for what they did, in athletics or business or whatever else, but at their core was contrite, broken heart, where you knew, okay, I can talk with this person. And that is so special when we're able to connect at our hard places and share the difficulties in our life and feel very loved and accepted. And sometimes we're really embarrassed to do it. But in most cases, if we've got that person walking or persons walking alongside of us, don't be surprised if they don't just grab you and hold you and hug you. I've been blessed to do that and have that done for me. Yeah.
Well, and I would say, in line with what you're saying, I've told people a coach without a coach shouldn't be coaching. And the reason is because if you don't have somebody who can
I
see
like
or
that.
help you see your own blind spots or help you, because every person that you're coaching is different. Everybody has different personalities, and sometimes we get so into our own mind that we can't reach them in certain ways, and we reach them in other ways. And so finding mentors, not just in the thing you love to do, but finding mentors in, like you said, whether it's a therapist or, if I have a marriage that's not working, then maybe find somebody who has a good marriage, and that's your mentor. It's usually not one person who can mentor you in everything in your life. It's several
Right.
people that we come across that we now allow to know us. And obviously we speak to God, but it's just God sends people, and He sends people in your life that when you are going through those times where you don't know, and you say, "Wow, this person came into my life," but we have to allow for that. And sometimes we don't. We don't. Oh, I got this. I got this. Especially as men, sometimes
Yeah.
we think we can do everything, and we don't reach out.
Yeah. And going back to what you said about, God's leading is, you know, kind of trying to be open to the Holy Spirit and say, God, okay, here I am. What do you have for me today? What help me to see with your eyes, hear with your ears, speak with your mouth. Help me to be a representative of you. And in that, there's a quote I wanted to share. It's kind of a life quote that I picked up. Some of you may remember Anne Sullivan. Anne Sullivan was Helen Keller's teacher. And if you remember, Helen lost her learning sense, her sight and her ability to hear. Not, I'm trying to think of it right. But her ability to speak in her early childhood. Well, Anne basically said, I'm going to go out and help her. And then Helen went on to probably be the prominent leader way back in the late, I want to say late 40s, early 40s, probably prominent leader in advancing causes for disadvantaged uh, people. Um, anyway, the quote is from Anne Sullivan, who gave basically most of her life to Helen, is the greatest service anyone can do is to help another reach their own true potential. The greatest service anyone can do is to help another reach their own true potential. How do you know what somebody's potential is? You get to know that person, and that person may feel like I can't do this, or Brian is a better speaker, he's this, or this person's that, and I'm not this. But to be able to walk alongside that person and help bring it out of them and help them know that they're awesome and they're a creation of God and there's amazing things that they can do, whether they're an extrovert or an introvert, whether they're more thinking than feeling. It doesn't really matter. It's all in the same mix. But how do we bring out the best in others? And what are the tools that God has given Brian or myself to help do that, like Ann did for Helen? My dad remembers being at the University of Nevada, Reno, I think in the late 40s after World War II. And Helen came to speak to the university students, and her whole talk was about her teacher, Anne, because
Mhm.
Helen was a product of Anne giving everything she had to bring out the best in Helen, who then went on and changed the world as it related to young people with disabilities, disadvantages. So I love that quote, and it goes a lot along with how I try and coach is getting to know Brian, getting to know this person or that person, and then saying, what do I have that I can put in the mix to help them bring out the best in who they are and thrive that way?
Yeah, I think some people try, they see a talent and they think that they can, because this person is gifted, that they're able to coach them. But it's what you're saying. It's having somebody reach their potential, and you can't do that without knowing them. You can't do that without having a relationship. You can't just do that by saying a few words, because you have to know what makes them work, what makes them tick, and then find out what how to motivate them, right? Because
Yep.
it's hard to motivate somebody that is motivated in maybe a way that Michael Jordan, not, even speaking about not being a great coach, and a lot of the reason was he's this incredible athlete that can do these things that nobody else in the world can do. Well, you can't teach somebody to do something they're not capable of doing. And then how do you motivate somebody? But he was an incredible leader on the team and helping them go through and getting the potential out of the other players that are on the court. But as sitting back as, can he take the time to create those relationships? And maybe at the time when he was done at the NBA, he was so big and people were so wanting for his attention, he wouldn't have time to make some of those relationships. But he's done it in business. And so, I think it's so important.
And one of the things that as a coach, I tried to model was just this is, what does it mean to bring out the best in others? And the great thing about track and field is you have, you run the 400 meters, say, or you put the shot put, and you have what's called a personal best, which means that's the furthest I've ever thrown the shot put. It might only be, a small distance, but for me, that's my personal best. Or I just ran this race, and that's a half second faster than I ran before. I maybe took last place, whatever, but it was a personal best, which goes back to that quote that the greatest service anyone can do is to help another reach their own true potential. When I was tasked with building a women's track program, and we had no athletes that were recruited or anything else, I just kind of hung out in the cafeteria, and different women would walk in, young girls, and I'd say, hey, have you ever thought about going out for track and field? What's that? What do you do? I said, well, you get to run, you get to jump, you get to throw things. And then I was fairly successful, and we started with about a cohort of 15 that were what we would call cafeteria recruits. And the whole thing was go out and try it and establish what your best is, and then see if you can beat your best. Well, I took last place, coach. That's okay. You ran a second faster. And the next week, I beat a person and I ran 2 seconds faster. That's awesome. So just going back to everybody has, innate potential, but sometimes maybe not going to be at Brian's caliber, but I can run those 400 hurdles and maybe I can get around the track without falling down or whatever it is. But in life in general, too often it's so easy to compare ourselves to others, and we need to be comparing ourselves to our own best and what we can bring out of ourselves. But it takes other people to do that, like Brian and like other people to come alongside of us. But it's really cool. It was really cool in coaching because you'd see these, especially with the young team, the young women's team, they just get lit up when they saw that they did better than they did the last time. And even though they didn't place, they improved their personal best. So that's
I love that, because it is so important to hit that. You also coach football. And, when we think about track, it's so you either are faster than the person or you're either slower than the person. There's no, that's how you can measure, because there's always times, and like you said, you can beat yourself. How do you motivate somebody in a team type sport that doesn't have, all they can do is compare maybe to the other person, because I can't say I got this time, or, I did better today than I did the day before. Is that more effort, less effort, or?
That's a great question. Let's just take it to, coaching, let's just say a sport like football. And so you can only have 11 on that field at the same time, offense and then defense. And then you may have some second string kind of kids, or maybe even some third stringers. I think that's where the head coach comes in creating culture and making sure that in that locker room that everybody matters. When the coach just connects, or the business leader or the CEO just was with the top talent, those down below are looking up and going, do I matter? Do you care? And that's why, going back to the one coaching tip earlier about team, is 1 + 1. If you really have culture, 1 + 1 should equal 3. Now, what's going on right now in the NBA, if you watch any of that, and I don't want to get too sportsy, but there's a lot of trades going on. Well, that's great to bring in somebody who was a two-time or three-time All-Star at with such and such a team. You bring him into your team in the NBA or whatever sport, and all of a sudden, the wonderful culture you had is now really changing because you brought in a superstar who might be, it's all about that person. And then your locker room environment begins to change. So much of whether your business is successful and people want to continue to work in this corporation or want to continue to be on that team is the culture that is created by the leaders and especially the head coach. Um, if the head coach just focuses on his talent or her talent, if it's women's basketball, whatever, and the other ones are just kind of left looking on, you're not creating a really strong culture. But when that superstar on your team goes and spends time sitting down in the locker room for a half hour and talking to that other one who maybe be the last person on the totem pole, and others see that, that is a dynamic culture builder. And it really, that's why it's really great that the head coaches or the CEO is observant of that. Um, what's that book called? Lead from the Heart by this guy Mark Crowley, and that's his whole thing is about culture and talking about different organizations, whether it's Four Seasons or some other organization, and how in the corporate world they're realizing more and more that the better you do with creating culture, the better your corporation's going to do.
Yeah.
And hopefully, though, that's a secondary factor. I mean, yeah, you got to make money or you're not going to be in there. But if you're creating culture and everybody matters, your company's probably going to thrive. Where you have a place that comes in and you're encouraged and you're looked at. I see you not just as an object for my success. I see you as a human being, not as just a human doing stuff for our company. Um, so yeah, that's critical. Thanks for asking that. I wanted to talk about uh, suffering a bit. Um, Suffering at 73, I've realized it's a part of life. And, I think I mentioned in the last time Brian and I talked, I have had 44 vocal cord surgeries. And so there's been a lot of suffering around that because not being able to talk and being challenged with that. But then realizing that it was in that brokenness, that physical calamity, if you will, or liability, that I learned so much. Because when you can't talk, you really have to listen a lot more. And I look back on it, and even recently, I had another procedure, maybe within the last year. But I look back on all the challenges around that, and I'm quite thankful because I think I would got swooped up in trying to chase the big time, and I think this kept me at a place where my, you know, the sacrifices God wants are a broken spirit and a contrite heart. And then we're also told in Scripture to do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others ahead of ourselves. So I'm quite humbled by, you go into a crowded room or, even in teaching and in a crowded room, you're kind of back on the side of the wall or something because you can't really communicate. So you stay out of the sound and the restaurants and so on. Anyway, I had a great wife, have a great wife who's really helped me with that. And Brian knows well when I was using my flip cards to communicate because it was so hard to talk. But yeah, so suffering's a part of life. It's not that it's not going to happen. It's going to happen. And so, where's your mentor? Where's your support group? Where's your faith group?
As you're coaching and suffering and bad things happen to good people, it's like you said, it's part of life. I just took a group of 26 people to Alabama this last weekend, and we were
Oh
going
yeah,
through the civil rights tour, and we went through the museum And at the end, they were, someone were saying, how could this have happened? How could the slavery and, segregation and everything had happened in such a bad way, and our faith? And so you say, well, how come, people say, well, how come God allows these things to happen? Why is suffering even part of it if we're all doing well? How do you help people get through, because that was one of the questions somebody asked me, where does my faith stand after I see this? And I would love to hear your thought process on when we do suffer, when there's things that don't go the way we want to, and we're asking God for the why. How do you help people get through that?
I think it's so important that when we have a friend, say, or a family member who's suffering,
Mhm.
is to be with them, to be, and to not try and, over spiritualize it, especially as it relates to physical health. I've got a number
Mhm.
of friends that are really in some tough places with cancer, and the list goes on. But to just be and to let them know you love them and you're here for them. And we have, for the Super Bowl, we have a dear cousin coming over who's her health is getting worse and worse. And rather than have her come over and just start talking about your health and all that, just to love her, to hug her when she walks in the door, to pick up the phone and call her in a week or two and just check in. And I think, um, going back to what we talked about connection, Brian, and how
Mhm.
connection is so important, especially when we're suffering. If when I don't know if I shared this, maybe it's too intimate, but I had a stroke about 3 months ago now. Did I share that, Brian?
I knew that. I don't know if we talked about it.
Yeah,
Definitely
and
fine, but yes.
it was really weird. It kind of I couldn't talk and I couldn't move this arm very well, and I didn't know what was going on. And we went down to emergency, and as soon as I got into emergency, this woman came across to me who saw my face and saw it kind of sagging on the side of my eye. She came over to me. She looked me in the eyes and she said, she worked there. This was at Kaiser. She said, "Today you'll be healed in the name of Jesus." What? You know what? In 5 hours, everything went away. And here I am, you know? So God sent her as an angel in my path. But going back to people who are suffering and the why, um, kind of take the why and move it to the what. What can I do? How can I help? We can why.
All day.
But in this time, what can I do to be a bearer of love and
Mhm.
unconditional support and not come in there with, you know, trying to over spiritualize it, but kind of, through our actions and through our love. And it's amazing how so many people have said, you know, directly or indirectly in my life, how important that has been. Um, so you may think, well, oh, so and so will make that call. Maybe they won't. Why don't you make the call? You know. Um, so if God puts it on your heart, do it. Do it, and because you're gonna when if I want to use a track illustration, let's just say you're running a relay and you got the baton in your hand and you pull your hamstring and you fall down. And then somebody comes over to you and helps you get back up. There's a great illustration from the Olympics in Barcelona where a guy by the name of Derek Redman from Great Britain uh, was running the 400 meters. He was favored to probably win a gold. And so he was in the semifinals and he pulled his hamstring, which is the muscle in the back of your leg, and he fell flat face first on the track. And the whole crowd was just, eyes were all on him. And they came over to try and help him get up, and he pushed the paramedics away. and the race had finished. And what he did is he got up and he started hopping on one leg. So here we have that suffering, you know, where he could have just laid there and not moved. He was going to finish the race. So he hopped and hopped and hopped. But the coolest thing ever, Brian, it was a commercial that Visa put up out of the stands in the Olympics. You never have this happen. A large African American or African English man comes out of the stands and comes alongside of him and takes uh, Derek's arm and puts it around his neck. And Derek looks over at him. It's his dad. And Derek puts his hand on his head, excuse me, on his dad's shoulder, and they go the last 100 yards together. And the officials were trying to pull them apart, pull them apart. And so over the years, I talked with Derek and I would say, well, why did you get up and do that? He goes, Terry, I thought I could win the race still. I was in shock.
Wow.
And then I said, well, when your dad came out of the stands, what was that? He goes, I don't know. I don't know who it was. I go, this is crazy. And then I realized it was my dad, and I just collapsed in his arms. And he basically carried me the last 100 meters. And his dad does this at the end, trying to get the officials away. And you could hear him say something. And I said, what did your dad say? And he told the officials and everything to get the hell out of here. And if you look at that from a spiritual perspective, God was really using his father, Derek's father, to carry him to the end. And Derek's father was saying, no, I am doing this, and there's no stopping me because this is what I'm supposed to do. It was such a special moment. Disappointing for him, but in that suffering, I mean, that story has been used over and over and over again of in our lives, when we suffer and we fall down, who will come out of the stands for you? Who will push through the bleachers and push through the crowd when all the hype is going in and watching everybody who's doing so great? But who will see you on the ground? Who will come over and say, here, put your arm around my neck. I'm going to go with you the rest of the race. So that's why, the whole suffering thing is about who will come along your path and speak encouraging words or do uh, acts of kindness to help you get through it. Probably a little bit more than you wanted to hear right there.
Oh no, that was perfect. I remember training with Derek and watching that and feeling part of it and watching it, wanting him to win and then having that happen. But the impact he's been able to have on the world as a result. And we don't know how God's going to use. And so, one of the things that I hear on the suffering is, you don't have to have the answer. You don't have to, when somebody's angry or somebody's mad or somebody doesn't understand. As coaches, we want to always have the answer to be able to share, okay, this is why it happened. This is what we do to fix it. And then it's fixed and it's gone. But sometimes we don't. Sometimes we just have to be there as that person that is there to wrap your arms around you and say, well, I'm going to go through it with you. And we will find those answers together. And I think that's
I think a reminder as you share that is God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use these twice as much as this.
Yes.
And just knowing that you're doing active listening, that you're really listening to somebody else. I know we're getting close to time, right, B?
I have another 12 minutes, so we can, and then there'll be a part 3, I think.
Oh, God. So this other one here is really important. It's we become who we fellowship with. Show me your friends, and I'll show you the future. This is where it's especially important if we have children or grandchildren is who are their friends? Who are they hanging out with? Because it's so easy to get caught up in the negative side of things in life and so on and choices. If that group that you hang out with is not a group that can, help build you up. So, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Show you your future is so critical. Is who do we hang out with? And if we hang out with a negative crowd that's always, whatever they're doing, isn't isn't helpful for your positive and spiritual growth, then it's probably time to begin to find a different group. And that's why, like, for us, for my wife and I, church is really important. And not that everybody that goes to church, well, they're all sinners saved by grace. We're all sinners. We've all sinned and fall short. But to be able to have that spiritual foundation with a group of friends, and where it's okay not to be okay, where they will reach out to you when you're suffering. There's a group of guys that uh, I meet with in the morning on Zoom, which is so great, and they know my stuff. Um, been going through some hard things with a family member, and being able to share with them, and that I have friends that can hear that. If your friend group is just wanting to party hardy and do whatever, uh, and don't really ever really get to know you, and you get sucked into some stuff that's not helpful, then break away and find others that you can hang out with. And for us, church has been a good place for that. Um, so yeah, especially as I'm a grandpa now, they call me Papa. I have 5 grandkids, and kind of keep my eye on who the hangout group is. My oldest grandson's 14, and he loves to lift weights, and he's a snowboarder up there in Oregon, and just kind of checking in with his mom and then him as well, and talking to him about his friends and say what are they up to and this kind of thing, and yeah. But they did some crazy thing though, Brian. I don't know if I told
Yeah,
you this. You have a few more minutes.
of course, yeah.
He loves to lift weights, and he's a good kid. He's ADHD, so he's kind of got that a little bit under control. But on Halloween, and this is going back to the friend thing, they have a basement in their house, and he had a bunch of his buddies over, and there were several girls too, but mom and dad were at home, and they decided down in the basement to put on boxing clubs and have a fight club.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, they were boxing. And so he sent me a video of him boxing, which I'm glad I had that kind of relationship with him. And they were just punching. He was punching on this other guy. The other guy was punching on him. And he said, I just thought you might like to see this, Papa. And so I got back to him. I said, man, you are so strong and you are so amazing, Benjamin. But what you're doing, you don't have headgear on. You're just swinging, you know. I said, you could get hurt or you could hurt somebody. I said, I don't think this is a good idea. So I talked to his mom, and of course they thought Papa was overreacting, but I needed to get my 2 cents in. I wanted to know, is this a good friend group that's down in the basement and they're having a fight club? I don't know.
Wow, that is.
That's a big rabbit trail, but
Here's
when
the
you're old and you're a Papa, you can go down
you
a
get to
rabbit
do
trail.
that, and I can give you the just a fun example of the tip. So, right when like cameras were coming out, and so I have my boys. I'm coaching track here in Colorado, and so both of the twins are running track, and they're super popular at the school. So on the nights that would before our track meets, they would come over. The whole team would come over. They'd be in the basement, and then they'd have their friends over. And so when cameras were coming out, I said we need Verizon or whoever wants to give me like 6 video cameras or something. And so I installed one outside and 5 of them in the house because I wanted to make sure I knew what was going on in the basement. Wow. And the kids would be so mad. They'd be like, how can you have to watch us? How can you have to look at us? I said, because you're teenagers. That's why. But what was so fun is I was a coach too. But it was fun because I would say they still came over, even despite knowing that I had cameras and I would come down when it got to that craziness of things that you just want to protect them from. You want to make sure. And when you say associations, I think it's everything. We are who the 5 to 10 people that we hang around most. But when we think about teams, and maybe we can end today with this one, but when you think about teams, you talked about culture and you talked about associations. And so a few bad apples on a team can destroy a team. What are some things that you figured out as far as, creating those associations where you're lifting up the people who are trying, the guys that are at the top, you're having them be involved. What are some things that you thought of as a coach? Because we had a pretty, at least cohesive, incredible team of people. I would hang out with any of them, and even up to this day, because the relationships we had. But we don't get to do that by ourselves. We don't just figure that out because we showed up.
Yeah. And so some challenging teammates over the years. One of the issues we had, and you remember this, is had some different African athletes, and they got to where they were coming to the bus late, and it was irritating me. And I had talked to them about it before, and then I would give them a time that was, earlier than what they really needed to be because I knew they were sauntering out there because their culture was different and they weren't so time bound. But doggone it, the bus had to get to Santa Barbara at a certain time.
Mhm.
So we're parked in the bus, and here it's time to go. And I see them across the parking lot over by the dorm, and they're sauntering over. So I told the bus driver, I said, take off, leave them. So we left them. And it was a way to address that's not appropriate that you come late all the time. And they had to get in a car and follow us all the way to Santa Barbara, which was like a 2.5 hour drive. And they drove alongside and kind of, you know, smiled at me and everything else. And I just kind of gave them the frown. But I think if you've got some bad actors and you coddle them, you don't need to embarrass them in front of the team. Well, that kind of was embarrassing and that we took off on the bus, but I was fed up with it. But to be able to have that relational quality where you can pull somebody aside, walk on the track, and just say, "Hey, you're being kind of selfish, or you're coming late, or boy, your grades, or whatever it might be, or I heard you were at this gathering and there was drugs and alcohol and everything else. Tell me a little bit about that, and don't let it just go, but don't embarrass them in front of the whole rest of the team. Take the time to talk to them and what's going on behind that. What are the reasons why they might be that way or acting that way? And usually there's a backstory that you can get to, which might be the beginning of a life change. And I know we're closing on time, Brand, but I have one more thing if we have
Okay.
time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so and as you get older, like I said, I'm 73. You think about, there's a, there, I'm in the fourth quarter, and when will this be over? And what I put down as my very last one is when it's all over on earth for me, simply, I want it to be known that he tried to live, love, and lead more like Jesus. When it's all toward the end, that he tried to live, love, and lead more like Jesus. And the word to focus on there is he tried. And Christ gives us a model of this unconditional love and um, never giving up on anybody. And I want to, when it's all done, that did I try and live that way? That I tried to live, love, and lead more like Jesus. And so at 73, I think about it a lot. What would Jesus do? What would that model be? And some of you listening, that might not be your faith tradition. That's okay. What you're put on this earth in, how can you be a difference maker in the lives of other people? And how can you help make your community, your country, your team, whatever it might be, a better place? So that's it for me at the end is he tried to live, love, and lead more like Jesus.
Oh my gosh, I love that. You think of all things you can do. If that's what you're concentrating on, if that's what your focus is, then everything else falls into place. All these
Yeah.
other things that people have written down are there. And it's such a testament to, as I think of these, and if you guys have been writing these down and you're saying, I didn't get to 20, I know you didn't get to 20 because we skipped a few. We'll come back to it at some point. But when you think of all of the things that you concentrated on, I didn't see one in here that told you how to be better at the actual thing you're doing. It's all the stuff that goes on, it's not exactly what you're coaching. I'm not teaching you how to dribble. I'm not teaching you how to run a 400. I'm not teaching you how to, be a great running back or a receiver. Those things all are part of what coaching is, because that's why people come here. And I think about the amount of time, and I'll maybe have you in a little bit on this, is the amount of time that you have an athlete, especially at the college level, right? So there's about a year worth of workouts and training, and all for, in track, it's 12 to 18 meets. In football, it's 10 to 15 games. You do all this work all year long for, if it's a football game, it's an hour, 15-minute quarters, right? For 10 1-hour times, 10 hours. Or if it's a 12-hour season, 12-game season, 12 hours of time to shine. And you don't even know if you're going to shine during that time. But you'll spend all year working out and doing weights and being with people. You have this time, and as a coach, that means you have a whole however much time to really work on these 20 things, because these 20 things that you talked about are lifelong. The game that's actually played or the sport that's actually done is such a small amount of time in relation to these things. And so how do we make sure, I guess, that we concentrate on what you've talked about, these 20 tips, and not spend so much time on some of the other stuff? Well, and we do. I mean, I'm not saying you can't, because you can't win a game, I guess, if you don't concentrate on the other stuff. But how do we make sure that that balance is right there, that we're really concentrating on the things that matter?
And that's kind of the way, when I put these 20 things down, that's why I titled it Coaching Tips for Life.
Mm-hmm.
Not coaching tips to win the game,
Yes.
not coaching tips for just athletics, coaching tips for business, coaching tips for your family, coaching tips for your relationships, coaching tips for life. And so it's not for performance, it's for being the best that you can be as it relates to who God wants you to be. And so it's for life. So, like you said, it's not about the techniques, it's not about um, the technical plan or any of that kind of stuff. It's just about how do we live a better life that, is more like following the example of Christ. But I don't know, Brian, if you're able, but maybe some people want a copy of it. I'm happy to have you send out a copy of the coaching tips if they'd like to use them. They're just things that have come up that I've thought about over the years, and gradually wrote them down, and said, can't be having 70 of these things. I got to, sift it down to 20. And I
I love it.
wanted to be able to share them with you on this podcast, and you're doing a great job with it. And your book, by the way, is really a good book. I'm 3/4 of the way through, and I can't remember where I put the book. That's what happens when you get old. So I will find it somewheres and finish it. But thank you for how thoughtful that is and how you're addressing some key issues. What's the subtitle of the book?
So There Is No Tiger, Overcoming Overthinking and Controlling Anxiety.
Yeah.
So it's all about the overthinking and the things, the movies that we play in our mind that are pretty much negative, that we can't control, that we always are worried about things that we can't, that we shouldn't be, and then how to get over that and start thinking about the things you can't control.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the book is about. So it's
amazing. Yeah, it's great, and I love the tiger on the front. And evidently, Stefan, your son, did that. Oh my gosh, what a talent!
Yes, he's amazing.
What a talent! He is amazing. I can't wait to go visit him at Pixar.
Oh, I know, it's going to be so fun. He's so excited about that. So what I would like to do, and for those of you who are watching, I'm going to put these coaching tips for life. They'll be in the show notes, so you'll be able to click on it, download it. You will have all of those. We got to, I think we got to 90% of them, and we did. But what I would like to do is maybe if you guys could put some things in the comment or some questions that didn't get answered for you, and then maybe you and I can do a live show in a couple of weeks where we'll ask people to come on and ask some questions.
I
I
would,
mean,
yeah,
that gets scary, but it'll
it's
be fun.
fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
We can get some questions, and if we just don't answer the question, it's because we don't know.
Or we,
We'll
or we
try to
want to
find
change,
somebody.
or we want to try and change the subject real quick.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh, and what's so fun is when he talked about the bus leaving those folks. They were really good friends of mine, and I was the one driving the bus. So I didn't have a choice. So I was conflicted on what to do. Can I pull out real slow and they can catch the bus, or do we just go? But what a great, we didn't have that issue too much anymore ever again at all. So that was really one cool way
And,
of doing it.
and forgive me for repeating some of the stuff that we talked about in the first podcast, but yeah, I think we might have told that story on the first podcast, but
Oh, hey, we can keep doing it. And so I will put out there when we're going to have these conversations. We will get together and do that. And so go ahead and hit subscribe. Hit the things that you do on YouTube to just make sure, share this with somebody, you know, especially somebody who's coaching and wants to excel at being a coach, because these are the things that is not in coaching school that we probably don't talk about a lot. And it takes somebody doing it years and years and years to figure some of it out. So why not take some of these examples right now? So you guys have an amazing, just incredible day. Don't forget that you're God's greatest gift. He loves you if you allow him to. And we will talk to you on the next one. Thank you, Coach Franson. I so
an honor
appreciate
and a
it.
blessing. God bless you
Yes.
guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.